Let me get another question in. You talk about going to gigs all the time, do studio projects which do not gig but have quality music and an interesting story, have any chance of reviews. What about making it, in inverted commas with a question mark? Thanks. Studio projects?
Yeah, definitely. If it's something that's only been recorded and released, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes something can sound lovely and you only hear it as an album rather than a live. Yeah, sometimes it works better that way.
Gary?
Yeah, just like exactly the same as Claire. If it's something that you hear and it sounds really good, then who cares if they're playing live?
So do you generally check stuff out live, or?
I'm a big fan of the live experience. I mean, not that I'm not a big fan of well-made albums, and I appreciate the difference between what stuff you can do in the studio and stuff you can do live. I guess, particularly being more involved in the kind of roots side, there's less stuff that's studio based, and there's more emphasis on people being able to come up with the goods, because it's about instrumental virtuosity and that kind of thing. So it is very much being able to come up with the goods live.
Dave?
Yes, basically.
So there you go, studio person. You've got every chance of getting written about. Now, one thing that I thought was important to mention, I tend to bring this in if I'm speaking to musicians about it or music business students about journalism. I tend to advise people to avoid reviews if they've got the option of doing maybe an interview or getting someone to do a little feature about them, for the main reason the reviews you've got a good chance of not landing on the desk of the right person to do the review, and as a result of that someone might not like your music and give you a bad review. I mean, what would your advice be? Do you think that it's worth a gamble on, is there a way of getting written about other than a review if you're starting out? What would that be?
Yeah, I think so. Like at the list we have like a couple of sort of Q&A slots that are regular features, and sometimes it doesn't really focus that much on the music. It's just asking them, it's just basically an interview and a chance for them to sort of put across a bit of personality. So I guess you could put yourself forward for that kind of thing rather than a straightforward review of the album.
Do you guys feel strongly that it's worth going for reviews, or do you think it's worth trying to find alternatives?
I think if you're starting out, it's kind of a good idea to just be happy with what you get, because you'll pitch something, you'll say, I've got an album coming out, I've got tours happening, and the editor will decide where they want to put you. And if they say, we're going to come along and review you tomorrow night, don't get in touch and say, oh no, I don't want reviewed, I want a feature. That's not going to work. A review is fine, but I mean, they're only, I mean, pretty much, I don't know, which publication can actually break a band through a review on the basis of featuring them, whether they say it's the NME basically, and that's it. If you get badly reviewed somewhere, then you can always just don't put it on your press release. It's okay. If you get a good review, put a quote in, put the 5 stars or whatever. Don't be precious about it.
My name's Dave Pollock. I write about music for lots of people, including the Scotsman, the List, and the Independent.
And you've done a Born to Be Wild seminar before. How was this one compared to the last one you did, which I think was 4 years ago?
Longer than that, I think. It's about 5. That one was very entertaining, more so I thought. I thought your patter has increased substantially. I do approve.
And were there any questions that particularly surprised you tonight?
Sorry, totally gonna laugh. You say that again, please. Sorry.
Were there any questions that were unexpected or that you found particularly surprising tonight?
Not really. I thought that the questions that were asked were all very sensible and very relevant, and it was kind of what you'd suggested you were going to talk about beforehand, and I thought everything that should have been covered was covered.
And if you had one piece of advice for musicians when it comes to dealing with music journalists, what would that advice be?
Not to fear them, but to prepare before you get in touch with them, to do some work and some homework.
How does someone get to write a review for either of you guys, which I imagine would be the first stage of getting into the list or the evening news?
Well, normally what you mean, somebody who's never done it before?
Yeah, someone that's never written for you before.
Yeah, but normally they would either phone you up or send you an email and say, I'm interested in reviewing for you, here's an example of my work. And if, you know, there's some sort of spark about it and the newspaper happens to be looking for reviewers, then, you know, there's every chance that, you know, you might say, okay, or you might just say, can you send me some more stuff? Sometimes we send people out to see a gig, even though it's not going to be published in the paper, just to see what they would give us.
What about you, Claire?
Yeah, probably 2 ways I would recommend is to try and intern somewhere, like be prepared to not get paid, but try and volunteer to get in physically into the office of whatever paper or newspaper. The list, if you go on the website, there's a bit of the website where you can fill in a form about interning at the list. But also just approach editors, try and have some examples of work ready for them to have a look at. Suggest things that you'd like to go and see, because that's a useful way of finding out what your musical tastes are and the sort of stuff that you're drawn to and the sort of size of venue or the size of gig, type of band. And or if you're not getting much of a reaction, maybe just start going along to gigs, maybe start your own blog and put your reviews up, and then it won't hurt, because you can always use it to show editors, like, this is what I've been doing, until you get started.
I mean, would you say that that's an effective way with having a blog? Because I think some of the best writing I've seen has been on blogs, and unfortunately these people aren't necessarily writing only about music. But if I was, well, we talked about one of them recently, and if I was in a position to give her a job, I'd have her out reviewing all the time. I mean, do you think that's probably the most logical step in the first instance, to actually have a bit of work? That you
I mean, because there is quite a lot of fierce competition to get writing work, so if it's going to take you a few months or longer to actually get an editor to give you some writing work, in the meantime you could actually be sort of honing your skills or perfecting your writing style, and you know, ironing out some writing style issues, and kind of cutting your teeth on that sort of blog format for starters.
What about student publications? I mean, did any of you start out on student publications?
Yeah, I started doing a few things for Napier's paper, as was for a wrote for the list, and something like that, or student, I would say, is whatever it's called at Edinburgh Uni now, is really good, and it does get people noticed. The main thing with this is quality, I suppose, and as you say, if you write a blog these days, like a really good blog that knows what it's trying to say and knows what its voice is, then you will get noticed. I don't know, I kind of speak from a lucky position of actually making a living as a music journalist, but I think writing for free for publications, wherever they are, that make money, is a contentious thing. You know, you do it for a bit to get exposure, and it's a very good thing. But if you just continue to do that forever for a company that is making a certain amount of profit from your free money, from your free labour, then it's, I don't know if I'd want to have done that when I started out. I was lucky that I started on a uni paper, and I think starting a blog yourself, you can absolutely.
You get paid by the uni paper?
You don't get paid. No.
But then the uni paper isn't making money either.
Yeah.
What about you guys? I mean, do you still pay your reviewers?
Yeah, we do. It's not the most handsome fee, but they do get paid.
But there's an acknowledgement. I mean, I think that this is something that's free when you're doing for a blog or your university paper. Like Dave says, there's free when it's a money-making enterprise, and at the risk of being boycotted for all eternity by a well-known Scottish publication. We're already boycotted anyway, although we did invite them to take part. I would advise completely against it, and I would also say that don't be afraid to aim high. I mean, I've been working as a journalist for years. People wouldn't return my calls as Scottish papers, but I phoned up the BBC World Service and, you know, had something on air not that long afterwards. And very often it's, especially with London-based publications, I mean, you can probably say a bit more about this, Dave, but often they don't have someone here. So the competition is a lot less to get into something. It still exists, but a style magazine called ID. I did work experience for them, and the people submitting the club reviews largely couldn't string a fucking sentence together. And, you know, they were it was my job to polish this turd as a work experience, right? And, you know, it just happened to be people that were involved in their local club scenes, and therefore had got in touch at some point, and I guess wherever they were, there was no one else doing it. So by default, they were in there. And
yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, when I started writing for papers in England, I had a CV from papers in Scotland. But, you know, you just give it a try anyway, you might get lucky. I must point out, talking about free writing, I'm not going to go at any kind of well-known national Scottish publication or anything. There are places that, like, I write for, that sounds like, can you hear me now? I write for the Quietus in London, and I've written paid and unpaid for them. But I don't mind writing unpaid for them because it's a really, really good website, and it's something that does, you know, it gets you exposure. It's the same as writing for the uni paper when you're just.
And the Quietus aren't making money either. I mean, I suppose that's another consideration. There is the element if you're a working journalist and you're allowed to completely self-indulge and write whatever you want. Yeah, that's kind of is quite satisfying sometimes. So if you're totally writing what you want, then I would still say, you know, in the first instance, do it on your blog. When we had the blogging panel, these people were spending like 20 hours a week doing it and not making any money from it. But one would hope that at some point they do, because they do actually deserve it. So, I mean, in terms of the aspiring music journalists, I would say that come and talk to us afterwards, and everyone else come and talk to us afterwards.
Can I just add to the briefly, in terms of sending stuff in, sample reviews or whatever, look at the word count that is standard in whatever publication you're sending to and stick to it, because it's generally really short. But it's absolutely crucial. You know, the standard Scotsman review is 250 words, which is nothing, but that's all you've got, and that corresponds to a physical space on the page. So unless you can sum up a gig well and adequately in that length.
Sue's totally right. It's probably good training to say, like, if you go to a gig and you want to review it, if you're thinking, well, I eventually want to review professionally, write the review in 200 words. You know, a lot of blogs, you'll see something that will be really well written, and it will tell you everything you need to know, but it's 2,000 words long. And if that goes, that's not going to go in a paper. It's going to be 200 words, and you have to say what you say in 2,000 words in 200 words.
That's the hardest part. I don't know about you guys. Writing 2,000 words is easy. Writing 200 is a nightmare, because you actually have to squeeze everything you want to say in a tiny space. Thanks very much for coming along.